Here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is Chris, and this is another one of my live broadcasts. This is my channel, Bar911-970. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video, whether you are listening to it live or pre-recorded hours, days, weeks, months later. I thank you for listening to what I have to say. And I want to talk about things that most people may be afraid to talk about, don't think about in the ways that I may perceive them. And I think it's important to discuss things even when you choose to say, oh, I don't want to talk about that. Now, a lot of people will say things like, for example, they'll see the title of this and say, oh, why do you want to talk about something like war? Why do you want to bring that up? And I see things in a different perspective, and this is what I want to share with you. So I hope you'll be patient and listen to what I have to say, and listen to it in its entirety so you could see where I'm going with this. To me, I feel things like fear, negativity, all those lower vibrational situations. To me, I use them as learning tools where you can benefit from understanding something when you see fear from just an observational point of view. In other words, it can help you by choosing what not to do or who not to become based on something negative. So most people see things like, oh, you're talking about guarantee of war. That's scary. I don't want to deal with it. Well, if you have an understanding of why things happen, you could choose not to do them, which could prevent the very things you may be afraid of. The problem is people are so afraid to face negativity because they see it only in one way, and that's negative. They allow certain things to happen through their inactivity. And that's why I've always said to people, a quote that says, evil thrives when good men and women do nothing. So to me, I see fear, I see negativity as a learning tool of what not to do. Like, prime example, how do you know if you like a food or not unless you try it? And if you try something and you absolutely hate it, well, then you've learned, okay, I do not like that, so I never want to have it again. So you use the negativity as a learning lesson. So that's what I want to base this on. So keep that in mind. There is a method to my madness. I see things as checking them out, seeing what they are, and seeing whether I resonate with them or not. And the only way to know about that is to face it. So let's talk about militaries and how they are guarantees of war. Most people don't want to hear that. Now, you have to understand something. War, whether you understand this or not, is a business. It makes the few lots of money and causes lots of destruction, lots of death, lots of theft. These are all negative things that I'm sure the average person really does not want to do or wishes could ever happen, and yet we support it all the time by their patriotic wave-flagging words. And we have to be careful about that and understand why it's a business. Because just keep it down to the bare, simple situation. Armies are made of people. Weapons are created by people. They do not make weapons for free. The military does not work for free. They have to get paid. And with any business, a business has to be productive in order to justify the money that goes into it. And think of it in this sense, from just a purely business sense. Let's say you own a construction company and you have tens of thousands of employees that you are paying on a daily basis to show up to work. And just imagine if there is nothing for them to do. There are no buildings, nobody's hiring you, and yet your tens of thousands of workers expect to be paid every day they go into work. Now, what do you think will happen to that business if no business comes along and you're paying your people to basically just sit there twiddling their thumbs? You'll go bankrupt. Do you ever wonder why, when there is a war, there was always a confiscation of rewards from the losing army, whether it's land or raw materials or slave labor. It's because, as they say, to the victor goes the spoils. So nobody would go to war unless it was profitable for them. Now, of course, there are a few exceptions throughout history, but the average reason for war is conquest. It is to expand and enrich the very people who govern us. And if you think about how, in basic terms, a country is established, you'll understand this. Because basically, the first step of any country is to basically establish their territory and establish their borders in their country. Once that's established and the people gather around that specific area, you need to start building infrastructure. Things like roads, maybe hospital, schools, things of that nature. That costs materials. It costs money. Because nobody labors, unless they're a slave, nobody labors for free. They want compensation for their work. So whether it was gold or silver coins, whether it was seashells, whether it was spices, whether it was land, they wanted to be compensated for their work. Nobody wanted to do work without being compensated that was not a slave in the terms that we know it. So they have to build up some kind of financial institution. Now, if you know anything about the history of the monetary system, most civilized countries since the Roman Empire have used primarily gold and silver as a monetary system. Now, as you know, with things like gold and silver, they have to be first found. Then you have to get people to use their labor and their energy to extract them from the ground. Then take away all the other materials and separate them. In other words, what's happening is it's taking time, it's taking energy, it's taking labor. And because things like gold and silver are not unlimited, it gives it its value based on the energy it takes to extract them and create them into coins for payment, for compensation, which can be used. For example, you could use a gold or silver coin back in the days of the Roman Empire to buy a cow or to buy a piece of a tool or clothing. So it was used for everything. And it was established by the government. Okay. So once you start building your infrastructure, you get to the point where you want to protect it because you don't want somebody else to come along and take the fruits of your labor. So you build up an army. Now, armies need clothing, they need food, they need shelter, they need armor, they need weapons. There are plenty of people who will sew the clothing, who will build the armor, who will cook the food. But again, they do not do these things for free. You have to pay them. So when you have somebody in the army, they're not going to sit there and say, oh, I'm going to do this voluntarily. Just, I'll do it out of the kindness of my heart. No, because if you have somebody in the army, they could no longer have a regular job to create an income to pay for their family, so they need to be compensated. No one in the military is working for free. Please point out one person in the military, even today, that doesn't take home a paycheck or refuses their paycheck and said, you know what, I'll do it out of the goodness of my heart. They have to get paid. They have to get compensated so they can pay their bills and support their family. So the bigger an army gets, the more money has to be spent on materials, on weapons, on just the soldiers themselves. Now, of course, like I said, when a country starts out with a monetary system that's responsible, in other words, gold and silver, the bigger the army, the more gold and silver coins you're going to need to pay everybody that's involved. And unless it's littered all around the streets, it's not easy to obtain. So if you have an army where there's tens of thousands of your citizens who are not building schools, who are not educating the people, who are not, rotating the crops, and they are getting paid, what do you think? Who do you think's paying them? The governments. Now, when a government pays a military, do you think they want them to just sit there and do nothing? That can only happen for so long. Eventually, you want to utilize them, and that is why you'll see armies go to other places, murder the people, and take their products and bring them back to their country so they can continue that process. That is why war is not just about murdering, it's about confiscation of another person's property. It's theft. And we don't seem to understand when even today, because let's continue with the infrastructure. So you build an army, and eventually you spend so much money, you have to justify having that army. So you start utilizing that army to spread out and occupy other people's territory. You take their land, you take their people, you take their riches, and you expand your country. Now, the further you expand, the more quote unquote money you need, because as you expand, you're going to have more mouths to feed. You're going to have more clothes that you have to create, more weapons for defense or offense, more schools, more bridges, more roads. So the further you expand, the more money you need. And again, since all countries throughout the histories, since the days of the Roman Empire, started out with gold and silver coins, and you have to extract them from the ground, well, one of the reasons for the fall of the Roman Empire is they got so spread apart, they didn't have the money to pay people anymore, because like I said, people do not work for free, especially when it comes to either murdering or being killed for doing their job. They're going to want to be compensated. So what the Romans started doing was putting different cheaper metals inside what they guaranteed to be 80% silver in their coins. They were diluting them. Same as what we did today. We started out with gold and silver coins, then we went to a paper currency that was backed by gold, then we had coins that had silver in them, and then in 1971, they took the world off the gold standard. So we didn't need anything. So what they do is they dilute the currency to justify the expansion of a country. But that can only happen for so long, because remember, money is built on confidence and faith in it. And if you dilute it, you get away with it for a while. But eventually people discover the fraud and they lose the confidence and everything falls apart. So the more somebody like Clinton or Trump, and especially Trump, because I mean, if you've watched my videos, you know I've told you repeatedly that neither one is going to help a corrupt system. I barely talk about Hillary that much because she's just a waste of time. She's a criminal. She's not going to do anything. I'm trying to convince people about Trump that he's not going to fix the problem. But one of the things he talks about is we need a huge army. And we don't see the consequences of that. Yes, they'll tell you it's to protect you, because they're not going to tell you true agendas. They're not going to explain the situations like I'm explaining to you here. The larger the army, the more money you need to feed them, clothe them, train them, give them their weapons, and the people salary themselves. Where do you think that money comes from? Why do you think we borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow? Do you notice that most of the money that we spend goes for defense and military, and they want you to be patriotic? They want you to wave your flags. They want you to give your okay that they're doing this, and they use the fear and not allow you the understanding. An army can only be paid for so long before it is a business that will go under. And like I said, that is why armies, when they fight, if they were fighting to just protect themselves, well, if they succeeded in that, they can just say, look, we achieved our goal, that's it. But you notice in every war, they take the people, they take the land, they take the wealth. So it's all about theft. It is a lie to make you think, oh, you're being patriotic. In this country alone, in the United States Corporation, they're always preaching about how military is all over the world for the protection and the defense of this country. Well, if that were true, why is our military not here protecting us? Because isn't that what defense is all about? I mean, let's put it in perspective. How many people, especially in the media, are always saying countries like Russia are the aggressors. Now, if you know anything about Russia, they have 2 military bases outside of their own country, while the United States of America Corporation has almost or approximately 180 bases around the world. Do you think they work for free? Do you think the people that sew the clothing and make the hats and the boots and make the food and make the weapons, do you think they do it out of the goodness of their heart, or do you think it requires money? Do you think people that put all of that money into it are doing it out of the goodness of their heart, saying, oh, as long as we are defending ourselves for freedom, it doesn't matter how much I pay and how much I lose, because after all, it is just for the safety of our fellow citizens? But think about this. The billionaires who help put money into these militaries, they expect a profit. Peace does not allow that to happen. So the larger an army, the higher the guarantee of war coming into play. Now, some people will say, well, why do you want to talk about that? Why do you want to talk about negativity? You're always preaching about peace, love, and happiness, and you say we shouldn't focus on negativity. Why are you talking about that? That's a very good question. And again, I will say that unless you understand negativity, you will not be able to make a choice of what you want. You will never appreciate how beautiful a summer is until you've experienced a harsh winter. And you could say, okay, I experienced that winter. I don't like that. So I want to go somewhere where it's warm. So I never have to experience almost dying of frostbite ever again. So when you view these things and understand what their real purposes are, you will stop waving your flags. You will stop following along and allowing the system to do what it's doing. But unless you are if you're not wise enough to understand what's going on, you're just going to continue to be played. So they want you to think the militaries throughout the world are there to protect you. Well, if that's the case, where are they? Do you think our military in Libya is going to protect people here in this country? And I mean, look at, for example, today is September 11th. And we all know, whether you want to believe it was a government-operated event or it actually happened by terrorists, I'm not going to discuss that here. But look at it this way. What do you think would have been the chances of those planes hitting into those Twin Towers and all the other places that happened with the Pentagon and in Pennsylvania, if every single military base, instead of being all around the world, was all here in this country? Do you think it would have increased the risk of it happening or decreased the risk of that happening if our military was here? So are they really defending us, or are they wanting you to think that, as they are the aggressors, placing their militaries in other people's supposedly sovereign lands? And you don't think the leaders of those sovereign lands are doing it out of the goodness of their heart? You don't think they are aware of what's going on and they're not getting a piece of the pie? Do they send their own children? Do any leaders send their own children to go fight? Now, I'm not talking about PR moves where they put them in a uniform and have them take photographs. I'm talking about putting a gun to their hand, putting them on the front line, and having them shoot. But they'll send your sons and daughters, and we cheer this. So some people will see the title of this and not even look at it because, oh, Chris is talking about something negative. I don't want to face that. Well, if you don't research things, you do not know you have a choice. You are picking one side that somebody else is pointing out. That's why so many people will think, oh, Donald Trump's going to save us. He's going to build a military to protect us. No, they're building a military that takes lots of money, that instead of feeding the poor and building the infrastructure and doing all the things that would help the fellow humans they say they want to protect, they're giving it to a military that eventually will have to be used. Otherwise, it's not profitable, and any business that's not profitable will go under. We're guaranteeing a war to happen. And I keep telling people, with an infinite universe with infinite possibilities, you have the chance to do everything. So I'm trying to point this out to get people to wake up and say, you know what? I don't approve of this anymore because I understand why militaries are what they are. Because if they were truly there to defend us, they would be here defending us. And yet they're all over the world. It's like police, the illusion of police. If somebody breaks into your house, and let's say you're lucky enough to call the cops, it takes them time to get there. So are they really defending you, or are they just really cleaning up the aftermath? They would literally have to be there as the situation happens to defend you in the way that you're shown on TV and in the movies. When was the last time as a kid when you got your bike stolen that a cop stopped it in the middle of it being stolen? They're there to take reports. They're there for the after effect. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you believe your military in any country is there to protect you, then when was the last time when your house was being robbed or your life was being threatened that any form of a standing army was there to help you? If you want to keep believing in this paradigm shift, in this illusion, in this old way that does not work, you are going to get exactly what you choose to ignore. Thinking I'm going to stand back and not do anything because I don't want to rock the boat is allowing these things to continue. Why do you think this has been happening since the days of the Roman Empire? And we still have arguments with people thinking that war is the answer. Please explain to me how murdering people and stealing things from other people is the answer to world peace. Do people not understand how ridiculous that is? If nobody had weapons, it would be a lot harder to murder people. You know what? I would have more respect for people in the Middle Ages because you know what? They had swords. They had to face their enemy face to face. Now we just look at a computer screen, press a button, and thousands of people die. And we're civilized. And we're okay with this. And we wave our flags. And we're patriotic. And we think this is a great idea. And we don't see that armies throughout the world are businesses. They get paid. It takes money. We're in debt, not because they're feeding the hungry, not because they're sheltering the homeless, but because they are stealing our wealth and giving it to a machine built to steal and murder everyone but themselves. And we seem to be okay with this. And it is not just the United States of America Corporation. It is every corporation around the world. Until we understand this and stop pointing fingers and say, oh, it's that particular one. The reason I talk about the United States of America Corporation as much as I do is because I live here. So I can only go based on where I am. Otherwise, I'm doing nothing but speculating. So until people understand what armies and militaries are all about, you'll stop cheering them and stop allowing it to continue and stop having these magical spells called words placed over you to put you in a trance and just think, oh, they said something nice. It sounds comforting. Sounds like it's justified. I don't need to research it. I'll just take them at face value, even though every single politician is pretty much a liar and a thief and does nothing but help the people that are either corporations, billionaires, or fellow countrymen that are politicians. Again, just look at the numbers of the money that we borrow and see where it goes. Is it helping the poor? Is it helping the homeless? Is it helping the hungry? Is it curing any disease? Or is it mainly going to fund defense and offense? So they call it defense. And like I said in other videos, if I had a game, it's called Castle Defense. You're in the Middle Ages. You have a standing army of 10,000 troops. And the point of the game is to keep your castle from being destroyed. Now, what do you think would give you the best chances of safely protecting your castle? Let's say you have 10,000 people in your army. What do you think is going to be the best strategy to have your castle not be destroyed? By having 10,000 of your army there at the castle, or spreading out those 10,000 people in your army all over the world? Which one do you think will protect your castle better? If you say putting the people all around the world, you should not be in any military whatsoever, because you cannot protect something if you're not there to protect it. And yet, in this country, and I'm sure in many others, they are telling you that the reason that militaries are all in bases all around the world is to protect your safety. Well, if a terrorist attack happens, like, for example, 9/11, and our army is all around the world, what can they do other than read about it in the newspaper the next day or watch it on CNN as it's happening? How is that defense? There are many people that watch football. If you, let's say it's the Giants versus the Cowboys. The Cowboys have the ball, and they're trying to get towards their end zone. And they are now at the Giants' 1 yard line. In other words, they have 1 yard before they score a touchdown.